I don't think that I have DID. I made a mistake. I genuinely thought that I had DID. A therapist confirmed it with me. I just feel so much not like myself all the time.
The Winter System was at one point one of the more popular DID creators on TikTok. With multiple accounts, they posted videos where they alternated between their 10+ personalities. They were one of the loudest voices and biggest representation of the DID community until one day in 2023, out of nowhere, they came forward saying that they never had DID and took down all of their old videos. There is little to no doubt that mental health is an important part of anyone's life and ultimately needs to be taken seriously. That's precisely what makes the rampant misrepresentation and lies spread on TikTok a huge problem. In recent years, we seem to have run into a problem where people, especially really young people, just adopt mental disorders without a diagnosis to hop onto a trend or to make cool videos. Now, to be perfectly clear, we're not saying that it's impossible for someone to have DID without getting a diagnosis, or that was what Winter System in particular were doing. We're just saying that it's undeniable that there are a handy number of creators who glamorize these disorders to make themselves more interesting for their TikTok videos. We know that for sure, despite the fact that it's really hard to tell when someone is faking DID. We'll get deeper into that later in the video, but there's a lot of misinformation out there that you can take one quick look at TikTok and immediately tell they're faking by how cringe their content is. In reality, most trained medical professionals broadly disagree with that attitude, and in truth, the only reason we know Winter System didn't have DID is because they told us. So in July of 2023, Winter System posted a video out of the blue where they said they didn't think what they have is DID and that it was all a big misunderstanding and that a therapist diagnosed them with DID.
I don't think that I have DID. I made a mistake. I genuinely thought that I had DID. A therapist confirmed it with me. I just feel so much not like myself all the time. I think what happened was I was able to ground myself in feeling like another person and in being another person, when in actuality, I'm just one person. And I'm just one person who's very confused about who I am, who doesn't have a stable sense of identity.
Then she said she started doing IFS, which stands for Internal Family Systems. It's a particular type of advanced therapy where the aim is to help traumatized patients get in touch with other distinct parts of themselves as a form of healing. Winter System said this was what led them to believe that they had DID because she exhibited a lot of the symptoms. Symptoms which includes deep unresolved childhood trauma, a constant need to disassociate, and separate parts of themselves that seem to have distinct personalities of their own. When they combined that with the abuse they had to endure as a child, and also the therapy they were going through, it seemed to line up to be DID.
I started doing IFS, and when I started doing IFS, my parts, some of them came with names. I didn't really know what that meant. During an EMDR session, I felt like I discovered more of my parts, and then later when I learned about systems and I learned about DID, I felt like it fit my experience. I am a survivor of childhood abuse. I dissociate a lot. I don't know who I am a lot. I don't feel like a person. I don't feel like myself. And I have a lot of depersonalization. I had these parts that that already had names. It felt like, to me, started to come out. I think that wasn't what was going on. I am Sage and Mason and Cole and Drew and Salem and Liam and everyone. I am all of them. I just didn't understand that I was just one person.
So this snippet right here did cause people to ask a couple of questions, because it really did sound like they were diagnosed themselves with DID based off the symptoms they were experiencing, and earlier in the video, they had said a therapist confirmed it. So it could just be a case of Winter System bringing up the idea of having DID, and the therapist just basically agreeing with them based off the similar symptoms they must have noticed as well. Now that's obviously uncomfortable because most people expect a therapist to be more hands-on and definitive with their diagnosis rather than being led to a conclusion by the patient. And we'll see later that a lot of the comments section was really coming for the therapist's head. But anyway, moving forward in this 4.5-minute video they posted, Winter says because they grew up hating how they look in the mirror, they might have confused or conflated that self-hate with having alters, and that's what led them down the wrong path.
such a hard time looking in the mirror. I hate looking at myself. I hate what I look like. That's because of CSA. My desire to look different. I confused that with having alters. But I think that I am just one person. I'm a multifaceted person. I have a lot of different sides to me, a lot of different parts of me. I like to look different ways. I feel comfortable looking different ways at different times based off of how I'm feeling at the time. That doesn't mean that I have DID.
What's quite unfortunate about that statement is that on a basic level, it really just sounds like they enjoyed dressing up to look different as a result of their CSA and repressed trauma, and because of that, made the massive leap into believing it was DID. That's unfortunate because the people who either believe that most creators with DID on TikTok are faking it or don't believe multiple personality is real at all say the exact same thing Winter just said. Being as big a creator as Winter was, one could argue that this sort of thing is extremely damaging to the community because it validates the detractors. But Winter reassures that they really think that they had DID, and it wasn't all some elaborate ruse.
I genuinely thought that I had DID. I had therapists confirm to me that I had DID. I was not trying to fool or trick anyone. I am just a person who's struggling with mental health. I was not trying to hurt anyone. But, the reason that I'm making this video is because I feel like I have a responsibility to you guys. Just because I wasn't intentionally being misleading. My face, now, for millions of people, is the first time that they've ever heard of dissociative identity disorder. And I don't have dissociative identity disorder. Now, a lot of people have an idea of what DID is like that's informed by my experience that is not dissociative identity disorder.
Up until this point in the video, Winter's been making really good points and was honestly doing an impressive job in explaining what is a quite complicated situation. But here's where things start to go off the rails a bit. Winter bizarrely begins to go into the audience a little bit, talking about media literacy. They say that a lot of people lack the ability to analyze media properly, and that just because you observe one person's experience with DID doesn't mean that it's representative of everybody's experience with DID. While that's true, it seems like the implication here is that it's the audience's fault for digesting Winter's system's experience with DID and not recognizing that it could be incorrect.
This was something that I was worried about the whole time that I was posting. Not because I thought that I didn't have DID, but because I knew that people have no media literacy. People have no idea how to watch a video and then think critically about it instead of just taking that video and they absorb information that they got from that video, take that into their worldview. That makes no sense. I don't know how people do that. When you watch media, you need to analyze it critically. When one person, who, whether or not they have DID or not, posts about DID, don't assume the DID is like that for everyone. That's on you guys, though. I made the video, right? But it is on you guys to have the media literacy to know that that is not what DID is like for everyone.
That's a wild thing to say, for many reasons. The implication here is that it's people's fault for not understanding or noticing that her experience with DID is different from other people's experience with DID, and that they just need to be critical enough to spot that for themselves. First of all, she just said that what she had wasn't DID, and she simply fronted it as DID because that's what she thought it was. She still posted videos of her several different alters and told everyone that what she had was DID. So the problem isn't so much that people couldn't tell the difference between her DID and other legitimate cases of DID, it's that she was successful in convincing those people who understandably have limited knowledge on the matter that her DID was real to begin with. It's very weird that Winter is now choosing to blame people for not having enough media literacy to spot the subtle differences between her DID and legitimate cases of DID, when according to her, even her therapists couldn't do that. So it's just a really odd thing to say. Regardless, she does take some responsibility at the end of the video and explains how she confused her own internal contradictions for DID.
It's also on me. I felt like I could take parts of other identities and take them for my own in a way that I wouldn't have to be myself. At the end of the day, I do have to be myself. All the different parts of me, they make up me. For example, I like cat ears. I also think that cat ears are incredibly cringy. I don't think that those two thoughts are coming from two people. I did before. I thought that Sage thought cat ears were cringy and that Mason liked them. That's what I thought. But no, I think that cat ears are both cool and cringy at the same time. It almost was easier for me to separate myself from parts of myself that I didn't like and put them inside of a whole other person so that I wouldn't have to feel like I was that. I hope that that makes sense. I'm probably not gonna post this video anywhere, but it felt good to make it.
It'd be easy to rip into her for admitting that she was considering not telling anyone the truth. But it takes a lot of bravery to admit you're wrong, and in Winter's case, it's not just that she was wrong about one statement or one video, it's an entire chapter of her life. And admitting it no less to an audience of people that have maybe relied on her channel and her content as a safe space for their own mental health struggles. If you put together everything she said, it really just sounds like Winter used the concept of DID and alters as a coping mechanism. And whilst that's very frustrating, all that matters is that she could at least begin to move in the right direction and start to feel better about herself. The comment section was extremely supportive as well. People get misdiagnosed, re-diagnosed all the time. It's a big journey, and it can change, especially over time. Or now we have new realizations. I'm not going to suggest anything, but I was misdiagnosed with DID and later diagnosed with BPD, and it fits me so much better, to be honest, especially with trauma. It's totally normal for diagnosis to change or be updated over the years. You were doing the best with the information you had. Everyone's healing journey is different. I'm glad you are at this point on your path to recovery. One commenter, though, is being passive-aggressive, saying, I think this happens a lot with DID, especially seeing how common it is on TikTok when many therapists wonder if it even exists. Wish you good luck. To which Winter spots and replies, why are you following a bunch of people with DID if you don't even think it's real? DID is very real. Stop using my personal experience to invalidate it. Winter is, of course, 100% right here. But that comment is sort of the perfect example of the damage this situation caused to the wider community since she represented DID so confidently. So with that said, it's important to also take a look at how she did that before coming to the realization that she didn't have DID. When Winter posted that apology video on her channel, she deleted every last one of her DID videos and took her content in a different direction, which we'll get into later. So it's a little difficult getting a hold of how her content used to look like before then. She did, however, have a short documentary video made about her DID by Brood America that tells us a lot about her.
Looking in the mirror and seeing the body, okay, we don't see ourselves at all, but then looking in the mirror and having blue eyes, me, Mason, I'm like, oh, I see myself a little bit. And then Cole with the hair is like, oh, I kind of see myself too. And it's like a little bit better than seeing the body. We just have a lot of distress, I guess, about what we look like. Why do we subject ourselves to that?
And right at the start here again, you can hear her put a lot of emphasis on her appearance, which is consistent with what she said before about hating the way she looked in the mirror, how it drove her to trying a bunch of different looks, and that eventually became different personalities for her, when in actuality, it was just her way of expressing the self-hate she was feeling at the time. Since the apology, Winter has come out as a trans woman, which explains why she obviously hated the way her body looked before the transition, even though she hadn't figured it all out for herself.
Our body is 27 years old. Our ages range from 6 to 30 years old. We feel like we're multiple ages, multiple genders. In our heads, we look a completely different way, and then we look like this.
Winter had about 9 alters, and 2 of which were female. One of 9 was indeed a fictional character. A lot of people tend to take that as a huge red flag. One thing you'll find common among the crowd who believe most people with DID is faking is that they all believe that if one of the alters is a fictional character, then that's the tell that it's all just an act. It's not true, though. Let's take a little detour to talk about fictives. Fictional introjects, also called fictives, are alters that are based off of fictional people or characters. They're based off outside people or characters. These characters can be from television shows, movies, books, fantasy, and other forms of fiction. Fictive alters in DID form to serve a purpose. While that purpose is not always known, it's possible that the DID system needed the qualities of that fictional character and internalize them to form the fictional interject in response to a trauma. Fictives can also form to disrupt the system. While fictives often form in childhood, people with DID can form new alters at any time, especially in response to recent trauma. Fictives can have positive qualities, but they can also have negative qualities and engage in harmful or risky behaviors. Some fictional interdects can be abusive and form as a way to continue traumatizing the system. There's an assumption that fictives are based entirely off of the fictional character. The reality is that fictives can have their own qualities and personalities apart from those of the fictional character. Some fictive alters can be predominantly similar to the character, while others take on just a few of the characteristics. They don't have to think, act, look, or feel in the exact same ways that the fictional character does. Fictives aren't supposed to be chosen purposefully. If somebody says that they did, then that's probably a sign they're faking it, but we can't be 100% still. Just like other DID alters, fictives develop subconsciously for a reason. As mentioned before, they serve one purpose or the other, whether positive or negative. Fictives are real. They can hold memories and can experience trauma just like any other alter can. There is a controversy, even within the DID community, surrounding the legitimacy and validity of fictional interjects in DID systems. Some people believe that fictional interjects are fake and cannot occur in a real DID system. Others believe that fictives exist, but only within certain limitations. Now, although fictives are real alters, it's more likely that a DID victim with fictives turns out to be a false case than a DID victim without fictives, just as how Winter turned out to not have DID by her own admission. It's entirely possible that people with fictives who post online frequently are just faking it for the internet fame. But it's important to note here that there is no medical data that suggests so. But anyway, back to the Brute Doc. In addition to 2 girls and 1 fictive, 5 males and 1 non-binary also made up the 9 alters that Winter claimed to have. They all had different ages as well, which gets curious too. You had Cole, a male with he/him pronouns, aged 30 years old. He's the oldest of them. Then you had Drew, age 23, a male with he/him pronouns, and Liam, age 24, who is non-binary with they/them pronouns. Both of these alters share a boyfriend named Junior.
We have 2 boyfriends, or the body has 2 boyfriends. We're gonna be making candles. This is so sweet. Love you, baby.
To be clear, when they say the body has 2 boyfriends, they're not saying that 2 alters have the same boyfriend, although that is true, yes. What they're really talking about there is that across all of the alters, they had 2 different boyfriends. So there was Junior, who we just saw was the boyfriend of Drew and Liam in particular. And then another guy named Casey was the boyfriend of at least one of the female alters named Sage, who's aged 27 years at the time.
Is this a dinosaur?
I think it is a dinosaur. We're so excited. We're gonna be doing mochi pimple popping, you guys. Are you excited, Casey?
I'm very excited.
These are so cute also. We have this lotion that we're gonna be putting into the mochi. But right now we're just slowly getting the lotion in. Yes, we are giving them their tea shots. That's so funny. We have dissociative identity disorder, and we kind of wanted to talk about that while we did the mochi today. So do you guys have any questions? Yes, Alex, this is my boyfriend. Sorry, I got some makeup on you.
Thanks for getting makeup on me.
You have such supportive partners, but what's the hardest part of dating people with DID?
Well, it's like in a relationship, you're trying to figure out your boundaries or how to mesh into each other's to be in each other's lives, and then when it's like, oh, you're actually 8 people, you need to make sure that
Everyone's boundaries are met.
clear about that.
There are a lot of people in our system. We have different ages and we have different genders, and it's like not all of us want to be touched in the same way. Not all of us should be touched in the same way.
Now, that conversation about boundaries is obviously very complicated, considering that 2 of her alters were dating the same guy. It was also unclear if Casey was dating just Sage, but also Bethany. Bethany was the second and only other female alter. She was also 27 years old and went with she/her pronouns. It's worth mentioning that the body who housed all these alters was 27 years old. That was her real age, and yet only 3 of her alters had that exact age. Jeremiah, which is the name of her green-skin fictive, is the only other alter outside of the 2 girls, Bethany and Sage, who were aged 27. 3 of them were adult males or non-binary, aged 30, 24, and 23. And quite interestingly, 3 of them were minors. They had Mason, a teenage male who was 15 years old. Mason had blonde hair and seemed to enjoy excessive makeup all over his body. Mason also seemed to be the favorite alter, as he does appear more times than all the others, despite carrying the appearance of an emo teen who would probably like social media the least.
Yay, it's working, you guys. Okay, if we just keep having faith. Most people just have one identity and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a man and I'm this many years old. Versus with people with DID, because of their childhood trauma, we feel like we're multiple ages, multiple genders, things like that. I was abused when I was 6. There was something that happened with a family member that happened one time, and then there was also something that happened with a group of teenagers that happened multiple times. After that, we were very hypersexual, and then we were like, oh, I guess that's a sin, but we've been doing that for so long, so I guess we're horrible. And I needed to get therapy for that. I needed to be seen by a legitimate therapist, not a conversion therapist, and like all of that happened within womanism.
There's a lot to unpack there. So just speaking about her childhood trauma and the proposed essay, people did used to accuse her of maybe faking her childhood essay, or at least exaggerating it, which is obviously an awful thing to say. The reasoning was that she tends to talk about them with excitement, which is typically not how anybody would talk about things that are as scarring as essay. Especially someone as young as Mason, who is a teenager and is supposed to be awkward. And as mentioned before, he tends to show up much more frequently than the others. This kind of complicates the already very complicated dating life of all the alters. Because remember, Casey and Junior, who are 2 adult males, dated at least 3 of Winter System's 9 alters. If you're struggling to keep up, that's Drew and Liam for Junior and Sage for Casey. It's complicated because due to Mason's frequent appearances, both guys do interact with him a fair amount.
We have 2 boyfriends, or the body has 2 boyfriends. We're gonna be making candles. This is so sweet. Love you, baby. We are just at the canyon, and we're doing a little vlog of our time here and how... Yeah. It's like a weird coping mechanism of mine. What song should I lip sync to?
So in case you needed me to point out the obvious, that's 2 adult dudes, one of whom is gay or bisexual, who both frequently hung out with a 15-year-old Mason who occupied the same body as their partner did. All we're saying is that it must have been really weird for Casey to be going on a date with his 27-year-old girlfriend one evening, and the next day hanging out in a park with her 15-year-old alter. Not to mention that even though Mason didn't front as frequently as he did, there would still be question marks on the whole thing given Winter once said her alters are aware of each other's presence and all communicate with each other. More on that in a minute. So given that she has 3 kid alters, you can't help but wonder if they are all aware, or worse, forced to experience what the adult alters were going through in their respective relationships. And that's just one of the hundreds of questions people had that Winter System, in all probability, didn't have the answer to. Now, it's very much a normal thing for a person suffering with DID not to have all the answers as they explore their identity and the role each one of them serve, but for Winter System, she never seemed to lack any understanding of her system, and often would lecture people on the matter. So with all that said, it is weird that she had 3 child alters. In addition to Mason, who was 15, she also had Jet, who was 12, and Damon, who was 6. Most studies show an extremely high correlation between people with childhood trauma of some sort with people who go on to be diagnosed with DID. This implies that DID is caused by childhood trauma, or at least a surefire symptom of it. With that train of thought, we can also deduce that people with DID will also have child alters created at the age they were abused. These alters often represent the abuse absorbers, or the fragile emotional center of the system, which explains at least why Winter's youngest alter was 6 years old. But then she also has an alter who's 12 years old and 15 years old, and you're left wondering if that's because those are ages where she also suffered some sort of abuse, or whether or not those alters were just randomly aged that way. Either way, it's somewhat odd that precisely 1/3 of her alters were kids. 1 is totally common, but 3 is kinda weird, especially considering that one of them is such as predominant as Mason is. So as we've mentioned, despite being 12 years removed the 27 years old body, Mason did seem to take center stage in a lot of Winter's content, and it's hard to understand why. All of Winter's videos from this time has since been deleted, but there are a couple of them up on her partner's channel. So we've seen the Brood America doc, and we know that Junior is supposed to be the partner of Drew and Liam, who are both in their 20s. Yet in this clip, where they're at Junior's apartment cooking, and even in that doc, Winter is in the form of a 15-year-old Mason and not either of Drew or Liam. It's worth mentioning that Junior was already in his 30s at this point and was diagnosed with mental illnesses of his own. He was also in recovery from alcoholism and a heroin addiction. So in many ways, Winter's system was as much a support to him as he was to her. With that said, Junior is definitely an adult, and Mason is not, personality-wise. They should have nothing in common. If each one of her alters was triggered by a certain mood or emotion, as it typically should be in cases of people with DID, then Drew or Liam, who are the actual romantic partners of Junior, should be the alters triggered by Junior's presence, at least most of the time. People with DID don't get to choose what alters are fronting at the moment. And you could say that that was one of the tells that Winter's system was faking it, because more often than not, she fronted with Mason regardless of what mood or emotion she was feeling. Just like in the documentary where 15-year-old Mason was able to talk about the abuse that the body went through when they were 6 years old without triggering any other alters. Another example is how mature Mason seems to be. Mason's age being 15 seems to just be a random number, in all honesty, as Winter would front as Mason and go on to talk about very complex topics that no 15-year-old could possibly do.
White and black do not describe the color of our skin.
That is terminology, referencing a construct.
If you look at the colors of our skin, mine is maybe like a peachish tan and yours is like a brown, right? Not white and black. The words that we use for race are describing the construct, like Junior was saying. The societal structures that I benefit from and that you are hurt by. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about race and we say white and black. We're not talking about the actual color of our skin.
No, just using terminology.
We were talking about terminology earlier. I've been thinking about terminology for a long time in terms of like our system and how we refer to ourselves and how we talk about our own experiences, and we want to own our own experiences more. And there's just certain terminology that we want to stop using. Like, for example, we don't want to say the body, we want to say our body. When we talk about like Salem doing something, we want to talk about us doing something. That's still kind of hard, we're still working on that one. But that is something we want to like work towards, is like claiming all of our own experiences, even though we may not feel like we experience them, because I feel like it's important for our healing. And so I feel like the words we use are so important.
That's why I was kind of wondering, like,
Ignoring the content of that video for a second, there's absolutely nothing distinct about Mason. The way Mason talks is not even slightly different from the way Sage or Drew or Bethany or any of the alters talk. Much less so the behavior of each alter too. So that means the 9 alters in the Winter system all had the same personality. There was never any multiple personality here, which, to be fair, she did admit in her apology video, which came after all of this. The only pronounced difference between her alters to speak of was how they looked. The age and genders being different was much more of an aesthetic choice than anything else. We've seen the apology video, so we know that Winter's DID was never real, but she seemed to make up one type of content more than the other, and that's makeup transition content. Now, there's nothing wrong with the makeup in and of itself. Giving alters a face and making them feel comfortable in the body will enable them to front more easily, which in turn helps to better understand and heal. But with Winner's system, it's just that she tended to present these videos as the makeup coming first, then the personality second. Videos like that often left people with more questions than answers as far as how her alters worked. It seemed like whenever she switched, the first thing she does is grab the makeup kit and the ring light and get to making content. This is what people are referring to when they say creators like Winter glamorize DID and misrepresent what it truly feels like to mentally process having different alters. And we haven't even seen the worst example of this yet, in my opinion. There's a particular video she posted that served as the biggest red flag for her experience with DID. In this TikTok video, she tries to get Damon, the 6-year-old alter, to front.
To front because he hasn't fronted in a really long time, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was Mason. Mason made a space for him in our closet, and I really want him to see it, so we're gonna try and get him to front. So I'm just gonna take my wig off.
Okay, so any therapist or psychiatrist will advise patients with DID to never try and force an alter to front. It's absolutely not healthy, almost practically impossible, especially considering by her own admission that this was an alter who hasn't fronted for a very long time and is the youngest. This alter also likely carries the most trauma, since it was the one who formed at the age of her SA. So considering that's supposed to be the most vulnerable alter, forcing him to front simply for the sake of it, or worse, to show her TikTok audience, is not only terrible misinformation, but also harmful to anybody with DID watching her videos and looking to get some moral support. She's actively teaching the wrong things, and it gets worse, because her idea on how to get Damon to front is simply to dress like him and go sit in a kid's corner, which she prepared in her closet.
And I just put it on like yesterday. It might be kind of hard to take off because I put it on really well, obviously. You guys know me. Like, it's actually coming off okay. So that's good. That always feels so nice. It's gonna take the lashes off. Oh, I should take my contacts out too. Warning, taking my contacts out. Change into a onesie. David doesn't like this outfit. So now I'm just gonna put on his wig. And then I'm just gonna put some blush on. Like a bunch. I don't know why I said some. I'm covering my face in blush. Okay. I think that's maybe enough blush. What do you think, Damon? He said that that's probably enough, but he might want more. Highlighter next. Damon is either here with me or he's super close to the front. Now that I said it that out loud, I think he's just super close to the front. And the Band-Aid. More blush because it didn't work for Damon to start fronting. So here I am, dressed as Damon, not Damon. So I'm gonna go into the little space and see if he can come out and see it. It's kind of a mess. This is his space. He just told me he likes it. He is really close to the front, but I just don't know when he's actually gonna come to the front, or if he will. Oh my god, it is so comfy in here. What the okay. Listen, it's still Sage, but Damon is here too, and he's not fronting, but he's like very present. And he said that this space is really cool and he loves it. He's not gonna front though, I don't think. I don't know why he doesn't want to, but maybe he's nervous.
This is so wrong on so many levels, and I don't even think we have the time to cover all of them. Perhaps what's most telling about the situation was that even if Damon fronted, we wouldn't have been able to tell the difference, since Sage and Mason and Drew and all the other alters all sound the same. Around the start of the video, she said the reason she wanted Damon to front is so he could see the space that Mason created for him. But later in the video, she then said Damon told her he likes it. So he never needed to front in order to see this space, and there was no legitimate reason to try and force him to. Someone in the comments said they really just wanted to make up and dress as someone else that day, and that's unfortunately just as likely to be true as anything she said in that video. We also can't brush over the fact that she seemed to imply that the way her system worked, she could just seamlessly communicate with all the other alters internally. The concept is called a co-conscious system, where multiple alters can either front at the same time or exist in a fluid state where they can communicate easily with each other. Such a thing is not impossible, but is typically only witnessed in cases where the system or person has come a long way in their healing process. Something we know for sure doesn't apply to Winter. That video wasn't the only obvious red flag either. She had made mention of people in her life not believing she had DID, most notably her boss.
I had to quit my job because my boss fake claimed me. They think that I would make up my trauma. They think that I would fake my disorder for attention. I feel defeated a little bit. I feel really sad because I was really close with them.
Not that it's a tell that she was faking on purpose or anything, but if the people around her, like friends or a boss, could tell that she never really had DID, as is the case, then it goes a long way to portray how much she misrepresented the community. On top of that, there were instances like this one, where it felt like she was making stories up as she went along.
This is Damon's wig. We cut it ourselves. Who cut it? I cut it. No. Someone in the system cut it.
It just doesn't look good. And it's not like forgetting things is bad for believability. On contrary, the fact short-term amnesia and feelings of blacking out is another surefire symptom of DID. It's just that in her case, it really did seem like make-believe and glorified cosplay, as some of her haters lightly put it. One thing that's undeniable, though, is that she did glamorize the experience a lot and often focused on how her alters looked rather than anything substantive about their existence.
I'm just going to be showing you some of these really cool Sims that Mason made earlier. My favorite is obviously mine. Then there's Cole. This is Jet. He's such a cutie. I was super happy when I saw that Mason made Jeremiah like this. Then there's Liam. I loved how Damon decided to dress himself. That's so cute. Bethany looks like a queen, honestly. She looks so good. Are you kidding? And then finally Mason. Jesus Christ, Mason. Okay, whatever.
So these were all pretty blatant tells that her DID wasn't real. And of course, it's worth emphasizing that that is the case. That's eventually what she admitted in her apology video, yet at the time she was so 100% adamant about her DID being legit.
When people think, oh, like DID is incredibly rare, what they're saying is, you can't have this disorder, you must be faking. So one of my recent videos got me on the side of TikTok where people think that everyone and their dog is faking their disorders, when actually people just have disorders.
It wasn't that she was defending herself on the accusations that she was faking. That would be reasonable. It was also that she made it a personal mission to talk down anybody who dared to suggest the possibility of a misdiagnosis and tirelessly lectured her audience on DID like she was an authority on the subject. That may seem like what we're doing right here in this video, but it's not, I promise. On a more serious note, the harm done by her content on the DID community is real, as people voiced out in the comments section of the Brood America documentary. Winter admitted he doesn't have DID. Please take this down. It's misrepresenting people that actually have a DID diagnosis. He just did a video today saying he was faking DID. Please take this video down. This video should not be supported or displayed as DID. Well, this aged well. He just came out admitting he doesn't have DID. As someone diagnosed, would really appreciate it if y'all took this down. Not sure why you haven't already. This person was misled, misdiagnosed, and isn't a proper representation of this disorder. And that's not a witch hunt or a targeted hate campaign. That's just people wanting the truth to broadcast, which again, to her credit, Winter was the first one to admit she didn't have DID when she found out. Although she said one or two weird things in a weird apology video, she did anyway take responsibility for it. So if she wasn't diagnosed with DID, what conditions does she actually have? Well, we don't know. She never told us. And honestly, much respect to her for that. That's definitely moving in the right direction. She did come out as a transgender woman, and she now exclusively uses she/her pronouns. As far as her dating life goes, that too has gotten less complicated. She appeared to have broken things off with Casey, and is exclusive with Junior, who always seemed the closer of the two to her. When she posted that apology video in July of 2023, she took a long break from TikTok and only returned in March of 2024, 8 months later. She now mostly posts Get Ready With Me videos and just general life updates. It's typically nothing too controversial, although once in a while she does get testy. And she also posts these weekly videos where she demonstrates how she gets her weekly estrogen shots, and it does get weird.
She felt like love wasn't meant for someone like her. Maybe she was only made to love and not be loved. At least that is what she believed. I could see it in her, the loneliness, and how it wrapped itself around her smile. She couldn't help how she felt. A stranger in her own skin.
Apart from that, she really just experiments with her content and tries to talk about things often political and controversial. But whatever her antics may be and our opinions on them, going from wrongly thinking she has DID and 9 alternate personalities to being one woman with one definite personality and a stable relationship does represent good progress on her part, and we can't do nothing but wish her well on the rest of her journey.